So today we are building on our work from yesterday in terms of writing quotes for news articles. So when we speak, we often use informal tone. This means we'll use things like contractions, so can't, it, I'll, and we'll also use colloquialisms and idioms. This means that when we are writing a news article, when we are writing quotes, we will have to use informal tone to write down what people said. So for example, these boys said they'd better make sure we're fairly rewarded for our awesome discovery. Digging those holes was no walk in the park. I'm expected my fair share of the reward cash. So because when we're quoting someone, we want to write what they said word for word, we can use informal tone when writing what they have said. However, we need to make sure that the rest of our news report is still written in formal tone using that reporter's voice. So for most of our news article, we'll be using our formal tone reporter's voice, and then when we switch to writing a quote that someone has said, we might want to include some informal language, some contractions, some colloquialisms in there. So here's an example of how that would work. The ill-fated emperor used up the throne and ruled a breakaway empire in what is now Germany and France before being killed, likely by his own soldier. So that sentence there, I've got my formal tone, my reporter's voice. Now I'm going to write a quote. So Brian, a regular user of the A14, that's my reported clause, that's still written formally, and then when I switch to quoting exactly what Brian said, then I can be more informal. I can't believe we found something so old. I reckon there are lots more things waiting to be dug up. So can't there is a contraction, reckon is slightly more colloquial, that's not a word that we would use in formal writing, so I've shifted formality. I've gone from writing formally here to writing informally when I'm quoting exactly what Brian has said. Here's another example of what that might look like. So, a local boy has been convicted of stealing shoes that were due to be auctioned off for charity. There's my formal reporter's voice. Clyde Livingston, the famous baseball player, said, "I was super disappointed to learn that the shoes were stolen. I'm glad that this thief will pay for his crimes." So there, when I've switched into writing Clyde Livingston's quote, I've switched to informal tone. I've got a contraction there and my language is slightly more informal. And then I'm going to switch back to my reporter's voice. The accused, Stanley Yelnats, did his best to explain the circumstances around the crime but failed to convince the judge. "They fell from the sky? That's the most ridiculous excuse I've heard in my entire career," exclaimed the judge. So again, my first sentence there is formal. When I'm quoting the judge, I've switched to slightly more informal, and then at the end, I'm going to switch back to formal tone as well.